All right, we have part 2 of the video lectures today. This one's going to primarily focus on measurement tools, but there's a couple elements of measurement I wanted to cover before we get into the measurement tools, just the errors and how to make measurement tools more reliable. It'll be very brief, but they're still good content information. So, some errors that might come up in measurement, these ones are focused primarily on the people in the researcher and the participants versus necessarily errors on the tool itself. Because we talked a lot about the tools measurement, the other one, but these focus on the people. So there's two different types of errors that might come up. There's the constant errors on this page, and then there's also the random errors on the other. So the constant errors is something that's present throughout all of the study, regardless of how many times the person takes the measurement tool, how many people take the measurement tool. It's not just a one or two, like, oops, surprise, this looks wonky. It's like, nope, this is consistent throughout. So there's different ways to look at constant errors and how and why they might present themselves. So there might be a contrast error where the researcher or the person giving the tool is viewing the participant in contrast to them. So the researcher sees themselves as one way, and the participant then is the opposite, based on some characteristics. That would be kind of some countertransference. And so if the researcher maybe had past trauma where they had experienced childhood abuse, and now they know that their participants are abusers, and so they might not want to identify similarities between themselves and the abuser, and so they're seeing the participants then as completely different, opposite from them. The halo effect is similar, but it kind of has that like all good and all bad mentality, and so they might view this person as good based on one characteristic or trait, and then they're going to see all of their responses as good because of that one specific trait. Same thing with the bad. They might perceive them as bad in one way, and so they then will base all of their characteristics and qualities and responses through a bad light. Error of leniency, it might be either the respondent's or the researcher's desire to identify as all good, or like lean more towards the positive responses. In contrast, error of severity, the researcher, and this is typically with the participant, number 3 and number 4 and number 5, are more on the participant. And so error of leniency is gravitating towards positive answers. Error of severity is leaning towards negative or bad answers, and the error of central tendency is living right in the middle, not really wanting to deviate from that and being one or the other extreme. And so these are just characteristics that might be present. If these do occur, you want to address it and try to figure out how to make accommodations to reduce some of these measurement errors. Random errors are kind of what they sound like. They're just things that pop up they're more situational, I think, is like a good way to say it, even though situation is one of them. But if we want to go through them, transient qualities of the research participant. They might be feeling really tired that day. They might be really bored. They might be diabetic and have low blood sugar at the moment, and so their focus and their engagement is really low. They might just be having a bad day. Their kid might have woke up at 5:30 this morning for no explained reason, and they're super tired. Things like that kind of just pop up. So that same thing with like the situational factors. And so maybe they were running late, or they have to get to an appointment afterwards. They're rushing through their questions. Maybe they just had a fight with their researcher, and they're just not feeling it and are being really aggravated and just don't want to participate in that certain day. And then administrative factors, it maybe is how a researcher is looking that day. And so they are presenting in a way that isn't encouraging engagement. Maybe they didn't take a shower and they smell. Maybe they're asking the questions in a bad way. Like maybe the researcher child got up at 5:30 in the morning and they're not on top of their game and are really scattered. And so you just have to be aware that these might impact the quality of the responses and how consistent, valid the measurement tools are. It has nothing to do with the tools, but it's more participant and researcher influence. So we always want to seek to look at making things more valid and reliable. So some tips on trying to improve validity and reliability when we observe that it's not as strong as we want it to be. I'm just moving this down here so we can see the words on there. Is that you want to be clear on what you're measuring. So maybe it's refining the research question. So I had given you guys some suggestions on that, on how to specify things a little bit more. You might need to add a few more variables or quantifiers in there just to make it clear. Provide better training for those who will be applying the measurement instruments. Maybe they just need practice or know how to say the words or explanations of what the questions mean. Obtain the research participants' personal reactions. And so if you're noticing that the measurement tool is not producing the results, it's perfectly fine to ask the participants, like, hey, is there something with the tool that's just not jiving? And they might be like, yeah, I don't understand what you're saying. You're asking questions in ways that we don't understand. We don't know what the terms mean. Maybe it's too long. Maybe it's too confusing. That will help you enhance it. You might need to move up on the higher measurements. Instead of having nominal, maybe you need to figure out how to make it more interval. We're going to talk about measurement tools in a couple different slides. Summative measurement tools are probably on the higher end of measurement, and so maybe transitioning yourself into more summative responses. Use more indicators of a variable. This is going to make your research question a little bit more detailed, or your questions, but it is, sorry, my computer is saying I'm going to die, so I'm going to grab my charger. But you might need to just add more questions to be more specific. And then you can even just go through your measurement tool line by line and look at the responses from each question. And if you notice that there are specific questions that are producing the bad or inconsistent results, maybe fixing those or eliminating them altogether. Now, if you do make modifications to your measurement tool, you do have to realize you'll have to restart with the data collection. Obviously, if you're asking questions in a different way than you did for the first chunk of your participants, they're not going to be the same. You're going to have to look at issues of reliability and validity. So if you do make changes, make sure you are then collecting data on just that response. And so as you can see here, we have a little target, and I talked a little bit about the target in class, is that this has high reliability. They're all, they're all in the same spot. So you're getting consistent answers, but they're not really on target and valid. So just because something's reliable does not mean it is necessarily valid. This has low reliability and low validity. It's all over the map, and it's not really consistent. This is not reliable, not valid, and then this is both reliable and valid. All right, so transitioning into our measurement instruments, which is chapter 12. This is one of the shorter chapters, so there's not a ton of specific in-depth content, but it is going to give you some direction on how to craft your measurement. Again, we are doing very basic research questions and research studies, so some of this stuff is a little bit more advanced than what we're going to implement, but it's good to know that they exist in case you ever engage in research down the road. But just remember realistically where we're at in our abilities, in our time, and how some of these measurement tools might not be the best, but they're also all very valid and useful. So we're going to go through the who, what, where, why, when, and how in a little bit different order. But these are the concepts, questions you're going to want to ask before you start measuring data. Is why do we want to make a measurement? Like, go back to your research question. What are you trying to answer? Are you trying to explore? Are you trying to explain? Are you just trying to gather information? Let your research question direct how you want to measure. And the question will also answer, what do we want to measure? And that's why I challenge you guys to be a little bit more specific in your research question. And so if you're saying you want to observe how eating habits impact function, well, function of what? Like, what is it? Is it sleep? Is it ability to focus? Is it ability to exercise, getting good grades, those types of things. And that's going to help direct your questions and also how you're going to collect the data to answer your questions. Let's say if you're going to do like a survey, that will direct it as well. Who will take the measurement? And so I think our like duh answer would be like, well, aren't we taking the measurements? Well, sometimes you can do some sort of measurement tool where the participant reads it to themselves. So it's like an online survey. So when I do my class satisfaction surveys, I'm not sitting there reading the questions to you. I'm giving you the measurement tool to complete independent of me, the researcher. And so if that is a route you're thinking of taking, are you going to send a research, like a Survey Monkey or a Google form to all of the Kuiper College listserv? Is your audience capable of completing it on their own, or do you need to do more, I don't want to say hand holding, but more direction in order to implement the measurement correctly? What format do we require? And so I specifically put page 239 in on the side because that is got a really good visual for different options. And so I anticipate a lot of your measurement methods are going to be in the form of survey questions. And so do you want to do it where you take an inventory and you have like, what are 3 things that make you anxious as a college student? And you're not giving them options to choose from, you're allowing them to create the list, and then that's kind of qualitative and quantitative potentially. But it's a little bit more open-ended and self-directed. Do you want to do a checklist where you check everything that we're providing for you as possible stressors or sources of anxiety for college students? And so that's going to give you more ability to run some statistics or get averages or get percentages because you are giving them a set things to choose. But is that limiting you then from capturing the full picture of what might be making college students anxious? So it's another format of how you word the questions. Or do you go to the scaling questions, thinking back to individuals and family and giving a scale from 1 to whatever, giving them the quantifiers for what each number means? That kind of gives you another way to look at maybe the intensity and severity of different things that might produce anxiety. And so it's just then, again, what kind of data do you want to collect and how do you get the most specific data? How are you going to word and design and create the questions? So I would encourage you as you're looking at the questions, just go to page 239 because it does give some visual, like you're kind of asking the same thing, but you're eliciting different types of responses for each that all have value and benefit, but what is going to benefit you the most. And also I am the person whose child woke up at 5:30 this morning for no explained reason. And my brain is feeling the fatigue from being up very early today. So thanks for rolling with me. All right, so we did the why, the what, the who, or the why, the what, the who, another what, and now the where. I would say maybe like this what format is like, you could throw the how in either, like how do we want to measure, or no, wait, this would be a good how. If you're looking at how you're going to ask the questions, so we'll call that one the how. Number 5 is the where. Where will the measurement be made? Is it going to be in person? Is it going to be on a college campus? Is it going to be identifying people in Meyer who look like college students and asking them? Is it going to be online? Figuring out what is going to be the most effective mode of implementation for you, given time, given student body sizes, students' comfort with asking questions in person. Those are all considerations to be made. And when will the measurements be made? And so, obviously, we have a time frame. So we're going to be asking the questions now. But something to keep in mind is right now, so I know mental health is one of the topics. And so we are in the middle of the Midwest winter where we don't see a lot of sunshine. The workload often tends to be kind of high. A lot of burnout happens during this time because we're in second semester, we're a third of a way in, it's not bright and shiny anymore, we're feeling overwhelmed, you're asking seniors these questions, we're getting to the end of, their education, are they feeling overwhelmed? That might influence and impact their responses. We just want